Hello, and welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have an amazing guest, Colleen Pimentel. Colleen is a TEDx speaker. She is the author of Second Act. She has over 30 years of go-to market experience. She is a certified coach, and ultimately, she is helping successful women rewrite their second act. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome Colleen.
Courtney, I am so excited to be here on your podcast. I love your platform and what you're doing in spreading positivity around, and I can't wait to get started.
Colleen, thank you so much for that compliment. And I just have to tell our listeners, the first time we spoke, I think it could have gone on for hours. So they are in for a conversation here. I first want to congratulate you. I mean, huge congratulations on your TEDx talk and your book that was just released. Let me make sure I get this all in. But really, a big congratulations on this. We are going to get right into the book. But first, I would love for you to speak about just like an introduction and a background of yourself.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to do that. So I have been in big tech for about 30 years. And in those 30 years, I've probably had 10 reinventions of myself. And I want to tell you that I absolutely appreciate everything that big tech and corporate has given me because it's made me the person that I am today. So this journey that I was on was I have to thank, corporate and big tech. I will tell you almost 6 years ago now, I had an inflection point. And the inflection point was my daughter went to college. And other mothers who have their children who go to college may feel the same thing. I lost my identity when she left. So we live in California in the Bay Area. My daughter went to Boston. And all of a sudden, I didn't feel like I was a mom. Now, obviously, I am still a mom and that has not changed. But my identity of being the person here, caring, making sure everything was okay, that stopped. And when that happened, I started looking at my identity, not just like, who am I? But also my corporate identity, which is what am I doing? And so it started what has become a journey for me over the last 5 to 6 years of self-reflection. Self-reflection actually had me determine what is my purpose and how do I get to live my purpose, which is the emphasis of the book. And it's really the book is a blueprint so that other people, when they get to a certain stage of their life and they're looking at, is this all there is? They actually have a blueprint to identify what it is they want to get to and how they actually achieve that goal.
That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for that introduction. And, I really do is we reflect life transitions could certainly be challenging. I feel like something like when you were speaking about like just life transitions coming out specifically of like college, completely lost the athletic identity that was behind me now and how you move forward. And I just love the fact that through your lived experience, you have now, like you said, I mean, created a blueprint. I mean, to be able for others not to be like to feel so lonely going through certain times of their life and to think, wow, I'm the only one. Like I'm kind of isolated. I don't know how to move forward. And so I always think that's beautiful when people take their lived experience and look forward to now help people, whether that's through speaking. And we are certainly going to get into that TEDx talk, but also to, like I said, your book. And I'm going to start with the book first because I think it's so powerful. I have certain excerpts we're going to pull from it as well. But I would love for you to kind of just take that step further to really help the audience understand the inspiration behind this book.
Yeah, I think, and I want to tell you the inflection point for me was my identity as a mom, but I think you raised a good point a second ago, which is for yourself, it was as an athlete, right? And as I've talked to people over the last few months, what I've realized that everyone is actually, dealing with this identity. And for the book, the way that I wrote it, honestly, it can be for everyone. It's not just for someone who's at midlife, and it's not someone who's necessarily deemed like so successful. It is anyone who is feeling that need to change. But what I will tell you is everyone deals with the same thing, which is, what am I if I'm not the VP of marketing? Who am I if I'm not the mother? Who am I if I'm not the athlete? Because we actually take our identities and we place them into these roles that we've morphed ourselves in. And we've become like this excellence in these roles. And so when you take that out, it requires us to really do a lot of self-reflection and understanding what it is that we want. And more importantly, it forces us to really maybe start over. And that is hard for so many people because when you start over, you no longer have that expertise. And so, yeah, you're going to fail, but failing is okay. Failing is actually the process of growing itself. So I don't know if I answered your question, but your previous comment kind of morphed me into that identity because I see it with so many people now. And it's not necessarily just a mother, it is any change that you are going through in your life.
No, that's beautifully said. And I have to say, like, this book, it's so timely because I wish I had a blueprint essentially to understand that, when we do go through these large life transitions, that we are not alone. A lot of people actually don't speak about it and they try. I know, like, just speaking for myself, I tried to feel like I had my life all together. Colleen, as soon as I was finished with it, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going back to school. And meanwhile, behind the scenes, I'm thinking like, okay, I'm trying to buy myself more time because I have no clue what I'm going to do with my life.
Yeah,
And so,
exactly.
yeah. And as you were speaking, it also reminded me too, when you speak about identity, how when you meet somebody for the first time, it's almost like instinct to ask, like, oh, and what do you do? And that identity, like you said, I mean, if heaven forbid, if you've been laid off or you're literally in a career transition, that could be hard sometimes to have that deep sense of reflection of, yikes, what am I like? How am I actually going to move forward? Am I moving in the right direction behind the scenes? So I love that you mentioned that and how this book really is. It is for so many people navigating life transition. And so I'm curious, like you said, you gave such a beautiful tribute to your 30 years in tech. If you could just speak about like some experiences that you've had and some lessons along the way that working in corporate has now provided you at this point of your life to have a TEDx talk, which is huge. That's such a great accomplishment. And then now to also write this book. So, what were some lessons along the way?
It's interesting because even in my book, like I talk about like the 4 C's, which is clarity, understanding what you want, which is confidence of actually taking action in place of fear because everyone fears. It's courage, which I just said. It's consistency, which is doing small, unsexy things over and over, the discipline. And then it's having compassion for self. But I raise that because that's how I actually created all the changes in corporate life too. So it's no different for corporate life as it is for personal life. It's the way that you view this. I think the difference for corporate life is for me, especially when I got to this point, I wasn't looking at what is my next move in corporate. It was more, I want to help people. And it it was different in the fact that I didn't have that blueprint of this is exactly like the path that I follow. And that was the difference between the two. But the actual anchors that I anchor on, they're exactly the same. And Courtney, you will know this. Like being an athlete, consistency and discipline is the most important thing, right? You do like, I think what happens is people end up seeing success at the end and they're like, this person was just talented. They knew what to do. They don't see all the hard work that went in day after day when you actually didn't want to do it, but you went and did it anyway. And you did that consistency and you were true to yourself. I mean, you've experienced that, right?
It's so true because I'm so happy that you mentioned that of even like how important it is to take time to get to know someone and their journey. Because when you are able to share your story, to your very point, if we're about to meet somebody, okay, we'll go on LinkedIn, we'll think we know them as far as all the success. But I'm so happy that you mentioned that the consistency, the daily grind, just like you said, like getting up when you don't want to get up, going to practice, going to work, whatever it is as far as situating towards an individual in their life. There's so many lessons along the way that have developed that individual into who they are today to see that quote like success or however, you define success. It's not that easy on a resume, right? There's been a journey along the way.
Absolutely. I think that's the one thing that I want to share with everyone is you just everyone just wants instant everything, right? It's instant gratification, instant results. And we live in a society that, I mean, you can get Amazon delivered next day. You can get DoorDash in an hour. You can get your questions answered within minutes and validation in seconds on the internet. So we expect all this instance. And then what happens, at least what I see with people, is they give up on themselves. And they
Yeah.
give up on themselves early because they don't realize that they just see instant success from other people. And it's really that grind. It's that hard work that you put in. But I think the other thing about that hard work is I think everyone focuses on the end result as opposed to just the next step. And if you make your focus on the next step,
I love that you mentioned that. And I took notes as you were speaking before, but how you spoke about, I would like to help people. So that why behind what you're doing day in, day out. And it speaks to exactly what you just spoke about. It's like not getting to that end result because a lot of the times, whatever it is, if it's in like academia, like climbing the ladder to a terminal degree or the corporate ladder, the journey, like getting there is actually the important part. But once you get there, if it's a walk across the stage that lasts maybe like 15 seconds, it's done after that, right? And yes, it's beautiful in the moment, but then it's like, okay, what's next? And so I just love that you mentioned like your why behind like what ignites you, what excites you to get out of bed each and every morning, even during those difficult times, because those difficult times are inevitable. And anything we do, of course, there's going to be challenging times. And so I know you had mentioned like at the very beginning, but you've had, I believe you said like 10 career like reinventions. During those times that you were going through those like reinventions, what were maybe some patterns that you were beginning to see, like whether that be in yourself and like personal growth or just even in maybe it was the industry in tech?
yeah. So I started in finance. I'm an accountant, I'm a CPA, but now I'm at Google selling big tech, right? So very diverse. I mean, who would have expected this? And there is a path that got me here per se. But I think the first thing is that I'm super curious as a person. And so I'm constantly learning. And I think these are skills that everyone should really incorporate. I think there's a stat, and the stat is, more than 40% of people live in poverty, but only 2% of the population has a library card. That stat is, like, just mind-blowing. Of course, it's from a few years back and maybe it's not as relevant, but I think that it really emphasizes the fact that people get to a certain point and they're like, "This is it," and they don't continue on that personal growth themselves, and I love there's a motivational speaker that no longer lives. His name is Jim Rohn. I don't know if you know him. He actually, was Tony Robbins was his mentee. And Jim Rohn said, nothing changes until you do. And it's so true. It's like if you don't focus on yourself and your own skills, you're not going to be able to grow. And so when I look at my reinventions, they just didn't happen. It wasn't like, well, I'm going to go and do this. It was me constantly learning and wanting to explore and understand new things, which took me to the next path. So I think that that is one of the things that I would say that has been consistent between each one of my reinventions. And if I look at my second act per se, what came before it, or as it was happening, was 5 years of deep therapy, and that deep therapy was self-reflection, and that required me to go and, also do internal work on myself. Like, if you were to see how many books that I purchased, I always tell people this because I think it's funny. My husband was like, "If you buy one more book, we need a bigger house," because I just absorbed as much as I could. That, I would say, that curiosity, that wanting to invest in myself, even though it had nothing to do, with finance or accounting, that is what drove me.
Oh my goodness. Like you are speaking my language, Colleen. Like the fact that you speak about like being curious. And I really do. I think it's becoming even more important today with how rapidly change is occurring. I think about even like longevity of career. And it wasn't like too long ago, you could be in the same position for like how many years. But now I believe it's like on average like 2 to 4 years for like one role or position. And I bring that up because I think it's so important that the point that you drove home about being curious, about consistently like just continued learning and how important that is throughout your life. And I love it. Look at this. And who is this?
Buster, you want to say hi? She's new. She's 6 months old, and we've only had her for a week. And I forgot to shut my door. Sorry.
No, this is so cute because literally I just recently had someone on the podcast and their cat was also trying to make a debut on the camera. So it's so cute. I love it. I love it. You were speaking about deep reflection and I have this excerpt from your book. It was drawn from page 59, but you say, quote, "Stillness and listening inward is the active work of transformation. Rather than being passive, it clears the fog. It strengthens your resilience. It empowers you to lead your life with courage and purpose." So I would love for you to expand upon that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for asking me that question. And part of this is actually in my TED Talk as well. But I think that I think, at least for me, as I was growing up, I was going down a path of, what I thought was the right next step. You go to college, you get a job, you get married, you have children, you get promoted. Like you're going down this linear path, but the linear path, it's all external, right? It's based upon what society tells you the right next step is. And you also get into this path of shoulds. I should do this, not necessarily what I want to do. And as we grow, and I would say this is more prevalent for women, but it's in men as well. As we age, we get to a point where we forget to desire, right? We don't know how to do it. It's like but desire is like a muscle. And so in order to like know what you want, you have to listen to yourself. And so the one thing that I would say is the way to understand what you want and not just what people are expecting of you is you have to be able to hear yourself. And so to be able to hear yourself, you have to be in stillness. And so stillness can mean a lot of things for a lot of people. It could be, meditating, could be journaling, could be walks in nature, it could be exercise, it could be deep breathing. There are so many ways that you can accomplish this. But once you start creating stillness for yourself, you can hear what your body is telling you, what you want. Because sometimes there's so much noise, we have to lower the noise, and that's the way to achieve it. I'll give you an example because it always resonates with everyone when I say this. Have you ever, like Courtney, been like really stuck? Like you're trying to find an answer, you can't figure it out, and you're prodding, and you're trying to force the answer. And then
Yes.
all of a sudden you're in the shower and boom, the answer just pops up. And I like to share that because the answer was always there. It was because you gave it space and time to reveal itself, and that's what stillness does. It gives it space and time to reveal itself, because I think society as a whole, we we think that we have to do what society deems is the next right step, but I think that we should be listening to ourselves, and ourselves might be exactly what society's telling, but have that stillness so you can hear the answer.
I love that because I actually experienced what you're speaking about. It was kind of like a transformation after academia. And I'm happy that you highlighted as far as taking yourself away from all the noise and the distractions. Today with technology, there like notifications going off. You could always be doing something. You could always be multitasking. And it was in that moment that I did that I actually had time, Colleen, to go on a walk in the neighborhood without earphones, without trying to multitask. And it was 100% what you're speaking about. That is when I started developing like actually like creative ideas, not like quite sure I remember that I was going to implement them, but I started thinking like, my goodness, I never have like been able to like allow myself to think this way. And it's the quietness, it's that stillness. And I'm just curious, like for people who are listening and they're resonating with these like kind of these moments that we're speaking about, like how could they reconnect with their purpose?
Yeah. So I believe this is my philosophy. My philosophy is how you start your morning is important. So I think this is how I used to start my morning. Right in front of my phone, I was like, "Okay, what is it? What does everyone want from me?" But this is how I believe that we create that stillness, that we in the morning, first thing, before the world tells you what it wants of you, right? Before you're looking at your phone or your emails or whatever, you take time, and what I do is I journal, but it could be anything that creates stillness. For me, there's 2 things that are in my journal. One is my intentions for the day, and my intentions are not the tasks that are on my calendar, it's the energy that I want to bring into the day and the energy that I want back. And the interesting thing, Courtney, is when I started to do this, it's exactly what I got out of my day, which it's like the subconsciousness of me writing it down did actually achieve this. And the second thing that I have in my journal, and I really, really emphasize to people, is gratitude. And gratitude is not these grandiose items that I'm grateful for. It's the smile you just gave me. It's the first cup of coffee that I had. It's the new person that I met yesterday. Those are the things that I am grateful for, and it's interesting is when you ground yourself in gratefulness, then when you start your day, because trust me, we are gonna get, like, lots of things thrown at us, but if you're grounded, it's easier for you to work through them, and you bring your positivity into your day. So for me, it doesn't matter how you create this stillness, but I think by doing this first thing in the morning, I'm gonna make take a quote from Jim Rohn again, which
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
"In the morning and win the day." Like, this actually creates for me the best days that I have when I start this way.
See, I love that. As I reflect, I was like, I'm like taking notes the whole time, Colleen, because you bring up such amazing concepts and the way that you elaborate on them, for example, like the energy and the intentions that you set your day with. I love that you mention how it's not the phone anymore as soon as you wake up, but it's just in a sense of like reflection and the gratitude part. A lot of this does, it seems like, okay, so I write something I'm grateful for, but I like how you mention it's the small things. When you start like racking up the small things, you realize how good life is in that very moment and that you're not constantly chasing that next thing. Because a lot of the times I felt like when I checked the box, so to speak, and I was on to the next thing, it's not that it was like a sense of emptiness, but it was this always like, okay, I did that. And now I'm here running again, going to the next thing, but not like enjoying how I was even developing as a person, how you overcome challenges to get to where you're at today. And you could only do that, like you said. I mean, just with that sense of reflection and being intentional each and every morning to think about like the positive things in life. And that's not being like so cliche that we're on plenty of positivity, but I'm telling you what, like having a positive mindset, and I always talk about how it's a choice. Every morning when we wake up, we have a choice. Even if something not so great happened the day before, when you wake up, it's a clean slate and you can move forward with that positive mindset. So I love that you're like speaking about so many different concepts that people could really help in their lives, like apply in their lives. My next question, because I really do. I wish I had this type of information when I was going through difficult times. But say that an individual is has accepted that they are going to take that first step into that, say, unconventional path. And maybe they have already had questions like, well, why would you do that? Or how does that make any sense? That doesn't have anything to do with your background. How do you like remain focused in that moment?
Yeah, that's also such an excellent question. I think we encounter resistance like from two places externally, but also internally. There's a lot of resistance from change, right? And it's all based upon fear. So if I look at resistance externally, even your closest allies, your loved ones will start questioning, wait, why are you doing this? You're so successful. Why do you want to like start over? Like this doesn't make any sense. But what I will tell you is a lot of times that question isn't really about you. It's about them. Because if you're making changes, like in we all have a place, right? And in the environment that you're in, you have a place and your friend or your allies have a place. And if you start making changes, this person starts questioning themselves and like, where do they fit now? And so I think that you are going to get resistance, and I don't think you should necessarily take it personally per se. I think you should see where the resistance is coming from because my closest friends asked me what the heck I was doing because it wasn't encouragement but it was fear, and it was more fear of themselves they were projecting on me. And how I think that you solve for this goes back to something that you talked about before. You have to know your why. You have to know why and your purpose of why you're doing this. And so I'll give you some examples. Everyone says they want to lose weight, right? Because they want to look good or whatever. But if I want to lose weight because I want to be able to play with my grandchildren, that is a real why per se. It can't be like the superficial like why. It has to be a real why that goes into your purpose. And so what I would say is it is so important that you not only understand where you want to go and believe in yourself, but you have to understand your why. Because as you are getting resistance from other people, you gotta bring that back. You don't even have to explain to them why you're doing it, but you need to know yourself so that you're not listening. And the second thing is that resistance is going to come internally. You are going to ask yourself, why are you doing this? Why are you spending so much time and you're not seeing a lot of progress? I know I have. I've asked myself that question, but it goes back to how deep of roots that you have the why. And if you can like ground yourself in that, you will get through it.
So true because I think about even yeah, like career changes or career paths, like why people do certain things. And you're right. If it's something that's kind of on that like superficial layer, it doesn't last you. And I love how you mentioned that point that it has to go kind of that level deeper to understand that why. Like you said, like I'm losing weight to be able to then spend time with my grandchildren, to be able to play with them. And Colleen, I am so excited. You are a certified coach. So, through this all, like I said, the lived experience, the fact that you were an author of this incredible book, you now are able to give back to so many others. Like, is there something that maybe surprised you when you first got into coaching or even on your journey? Are there just like great moments that you'd love to share?
Here's what I would love to share. And I think it's really important because we don't talk about it enough. We're all going through the same thing. You're not alone. You're not broken. You probably have just outgrown a version of yourself and you want to get to that new version of yourself. And that is I mean, I see similarities when I talk to people, examples that we already talked about, identity, changes in your identity, everyone wanting something but not knowing how or how to do this. And not being able to take action through fear. So, like, there's all these consistencies, and I think that it's just interesting when you start to aggregate, what you see in the patterns that you see. There's definite patterns, but I would say to everyone, you're not broken. You're not broken at all. And if you're feeling something, it is a compass. It is something telling you that there's something else out there. And the one thing that I want to also share with everyone, because I think it's really important if people feel like there's something else out there, but they're like, "Well, but I financially, I can't this is where I am." You don't have to burn everything down. You can actually do things in parallel, and that's what I do, honestly. I actually still work at Google, and I do this other stuff on the side, and so it's a combination, and I think that's really important for people to hear, especially with people that are like, "Wait, if I'm not the VP of marketing, who am I?" You can do both. You can segue your way to it, so it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
I love that you mentioned that because that's like realistic for some people that they can't let go. They need that full time paycheck, so to speak, but to still be able to realistically do something on the side. If it is that hobby, if it is something that just ignites that fire, like at the end of a day, you did what you needed to, but now you are on to something that, when it does, it seems like when I look at time, it goes by so quick when you're doing something that you truly are passionate about. And, even within coaching, I am super interested to hear how your coaching is maybe different from traditional coaching. Like you have given incredible advice, realistic advice, but how does your coaching maybe differ from that traditional coaching?
So, I think that I'm different in the way that I live corporate for the last 30 years. I live big tech for the last 30 years. Will not I will be very truthful. I am a high performer. And so I have fallen into all of these traps, right? And it's only now that I can speak from the lessons that I have learned and have gone through. And I think that's what makes me different is I have the lived experience to not just empathize with what people are going through, but also having been there, understanding like all of the, fears that pop into your head or the imposter syndrome, all of these things. I think that's what makes me different.
That's so true. And when you can like speak from that lived experience, it's a whole different ball game because people want to hear that. That's so incredibly important. In 30 years, like that extensive knowledge, the wisdom that you have of being, like you said, a high performer. How do you become a high performer and ultimately gain that level, a high level of success? Well, you lived it. You know the formula to share with others. I'm so happy you mentioned that. And I want to go back to the book real quick because you have this other excerpt that's super powerful. And you said, quote, that was one of my biggest lessons. Authentic desire can't be forced, but it will rise when you create the space. So I would just love to open the floor for you.
Yeah. This actually really ties into stillness again. I think, as part of society and these shoulds that are placed on us, and especially right now with social media, right? What I'm starting to see is everyone's looking the same, everyone's acting the same. But what actually makes us valuable are our differences, our quirkiness. Like, I am not like anyone else. I am very quirky, but and I used to try to hide that quirkiness. I used to try to fit in. But the reality is my quirkiness is actually my gift. It's what I can provide to society that no one else can. And so I think, going back to the stillness, it takes a lot of time to understand these things and to hear, but once you understand yourself and understand what you're trying to achieve instead of trying to fit into a mold that someone else has created. Live yourself because no one can do better at being you than you. But trust me, I've tried. I've tried to be someone else and that does not work. I'm not very good at that.
I 100% agree with you. I think it's beautiful to watch people out there that are just being themselves. And I think like I would love to ask you some questions with regards to leadership. Like I said, 30 years extensive knowledge and wisdom at this highest level in tech. So here you are with leadership. We speak about having the courage to move forward, but sometimes when you have to stand up and you have to speak a certain truth. So I would just love to open up the floor is to like leadership lessons that you could provide our listeners that you have learned throughout the years from and that you have that like lived experience to speak from.
So, first off, think that leadership isn't necessarily management. Not that you were saying that it is. I think management is just making sure that tasks are being done in a certain way. But leadership and my leadership is through influence, right? And it's actually the hardest type of leadership that you can have, honestly. I think and I have learned this later in life, not at the beginning, but later in life. And I'm going to actually give kudos to Google for this because they create a culture and an environment that allows people to show up authentically. But if you can create an environment where everyone is seen and heard, where maybe the decision isn't the decision that everyone wants, but at least they're being seen and heard per se. And if you allow people to show up and to show up with, I made a mistake, but you don't like do it like you don't say anything bad about that mistake. In fact, you celebrate that mistake in a weird way because you learn from it. You create an environment where people are not afraid to be themselves because they know that they're not going to be reprimanded from doing it. They know they're not going to be reprimanded from having or making mistakes. I think culturally, especially for leadership, this is key. This is how you get the most out of everyone. This is how people show up and are happy and energized and don't wanna do things because of a paycheck, because they want to contribute and they know that they're contributing to something bigger than themselves. So I would say that this I learned later in life per se, but I try to really foster an environment where everyone, regardless of who they are and regardless of their quirks, that we celebrate those and that they come and they are never afraid of being reprimanded for anything, that trying is the ultimate success.
That is so incredibly powerful because as you were speaking, it reminded me of the fact of, this idea. I speak about it a lot and I learned it from sport, but it was never fear of failure. And if you are able to create that environment where people could come, like you said, being their authentic self, but the willingness to try and perhaps maybe make a mistake, but for it not to be like smeared in your face for the rest of time because this one, it seems like it's going to be even that much more important with how quick things are moving, but the need for innovation and the need for innovation and how we get there really is about trying, sometimes really being successful. But on the flip side of the coin, that if we do that, if we make a mistake, you are in an environment where you learn what are the lessons that you need to learn along the way from making that mistake. Don't make that mistake again, but then move forward and it's in the past and you keep moving forward. Cause I think those people and the companies that are able to maybe make that mistake, but then keep moving forward quickly, I think those are the ones that are going to win like in the end. And I would just love to hear your perspective on innovation and on, learning from mistakes.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that you just said. It actually, is my philosophy. I will say we're in a unique situation right now with AI, right? AI is just creating speed of innovation like we have never seen before. Here's what I struggle with a little bit, Courtney. And I was out for dinner with some friends yesterday, and this one person who's extremely successful, she told me how fearful she was of AI and how she's struggling with it. And both me and another friend were like, why? And she's like, "Well, because we have to move really, really fast." And I sat there and I listened. That's actually the problem. The problem is unless you know where you are going, unless you know the direction, speed without direction is not momentum, it's exhaustion. And so, what I'm afraid of today is we have AI, and I use AI. I love AI, and I want everyone to use AI. But there are critical thinking that you need to do before you use AI. And so, if you're just using it to create, yeah, it'll create whatever you want. But how useful is that? And so my struggle and my suggestion to my friend and also to the people on here, like with AI and the innovation that we're seeing today, don't forget that you need to understand the fundamentals before AI can create anything for you.
I think that's a very good point because this topic has certainly come up specifically in education. And we see these younger generations who are now growing up with AI. And during my time, I mean, yeah, you not only learned how to think, you learned how to critically think too. And I love that you mentioned that point of really understanding the critical thought process that goes in before. Like, how do you even know to those quote good questions? Well, you have to have like a baseline knowledge to even put it in a chat GPT. So I do feel that there needs to be a sense of understanding first to be able to utilize AI to amplify that idea. Maybe it takes you in a completely different direction, but unless you have that foundational knowledge, you can't get from point A to point B without knowing that. So I'm really interested. What are your thoughts for like the future, like where we're headed right now? Any like exciting moments or things that, if we can improve now and start today, what could we do?
Yeah. So first off, you articulated that so much better than me. So bravo. That's exactly what I was trying to say. Where am I seeing us go today? I think this is where, my philosophy in second act comes in, regardless of whether you're in midlife or not. I think that our society is so focused on speed today. And that's what my TED talk was about, honestly. It was that exact quote that I gave you, which was speed without direction is not momentum, it's exhaustion. And that's what I believe we need to incorporate is we need to incorporate stillness. We need to incorporate the fact that we don't have to live by these shoulds. We need to embrace more critical thinking because as I see the future, I mean, it's amazing what technology is doing today, but it is going to get away from us if we don't incorporate these things into our lives because we are going to move super fast, but we're going to realize that we didn't get very far. And in fact, we are going to create what we didn't necessarily want to create because we didn't have that direction first. So I would love, to be able to um to broadcast, the stillness, understanding, hearing yourself, listening to yourself, celebrating our authenticity to the world because that is what I think we need, especially with the way that technology is innovating today.
That was powerful, Colleen. I think about as you were speaking, the things that take us 5, 10, 15 years to accomplish, provide an individual that deep sense of satisfaction. Like you can't get that from exactly what you were saying, that like that instant gratification, the project that you work on for like 5 days or something. But it's about slowing down and working on something day in and day out. You could learn so much about yourself, let alone what you're actually working on. But boy, when you succeed at that 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, it just provides that deeper level of satisfaction that when you reflect back all those hard days, those challenging days, it was so worth it. And those lessons you could take on to that next activity. And I think this all does relate back to technology and how we can move forward in a way that it's going to advance our society, advance individual tasks, but we do it in a way that it's ethical, that it's within compliance, because you're right, it could probably be taken away. I'm not in tech, but it probably could be taken away very quickly from us as far as like the hold of where technology could lead if we don't understand where it's headed. So, because we're too quick to get there.
And I think that if we focus less on the destination, but more on the journey, which is what you said earlier today, that will lead us in the right direction. So stop focusing on what you want in the end, but that journey and celebrate that. That will give us back the direction that we need.
That's so true. And speaking of journey, I just want to hear the journey leading up to that TEDx talk. Like, tell us all about it, like preparation, how it came about.
This is thank you for asking that question. So the TEDx talk is fairly recent. I did it about 2 weeks ago. It was McMaster U in Ontario, Canada, Ontario, Canada. And I'll be honest with you, when I look at, like, one of the desires that I wanted, and I've wanted this for 15 years, it was a TED Talk, but it was just a dream. Like, I was like, "Yeah, I want a TED Talk," and people, 15 years ago were like, "Well, go do it." And I was like, "Who, me? What am I gonna talk about? What do I have?" Right? And then it stayed in me, but it wasn't until last year. Last year, I really kinda understood where I was going, where I wanted to take my second act per se. I was like, "I wanna do a TED Talk," and then I actually had to take the action. It was less of, "Oh, this I wanna do this. I need to make this happen." So, I'm from sales, go to market, so I put a strategy in place, and thank goodness I'm from sales because I got a lot of rejections, a lot of, "Colleen, you're not a good fit. Colleen, this doesn't work." And I think it was actually 20 rejections I got before I actually got my acceptance for this particular TED Talk. And so what I would love to say is it's less about me doing a TED Talk. Again, it goes back to the journey. Those 20 rejections, that was like me refining what I was going to talk about. And the fact that I didn't get a TED Talk 15 years ago was probably a good thing because I actually had to earn the journey, right? I had to earn the knowledge that I talked about on that stage 2 weeks ago. So what I would tell everyone, like what I would leave everyone with is if you have a dream, you can make it happen. And if you have no's, no doesn't mean no forever. It just means refine and like put your energy into achieving that. I got to realize my dream. And I want to tell you, Courtney, it was so much fun. I had a blast and I feel like I really connected with the audience. And I am so happy that I did this. I remember I was like, told my husband, "I want to do it again." He's like, "You want to do it again?" But yeah, so thank you for asking me about the TED Talk.
Absolutely, Colleen. I got chills when you were just speaking about like the moment of being just like on stage and realizing, like you said, going through 20 rejections. And I think what's so interesting that you mentioned is the journey leading up to it. How I believe it was Steve Jobs. I can't remember. I don't want to say the exact quote because I don't know the exact quote. But essentially, it's when you look back at your life, you then can connect the dots as to how you would obviously lead to present day, but there's lessons that are learned. And it made me think of, because I experienced, I was in sales at one point too, but those times that you were receiving that no, that you had to keep going back, those lessons led you to ultimate success. And like you said, I mean, all the knowledge, the wisdom that you gained along the way, the confidence, the additional self-esteem that after those 20 rejections, you succeeded, you earned it. So I really do. I think that's a powerful lesson of the journey leading up, because you're right. Like when you're on the TEDx stage, you're speaking about what you are so passionate about, what you are knowledgeable about. But it's all about that journey initially getting there. How did you get there? And I think that could really help so many people along the way with their journey. Maybe it's not necessarily a TEDx, but it's like, wow, like, if I've received like those rejections, or I heard somebody tell their story that they've received rejections, like, man, like maybe I can do that. And I speak about that a lot, about listening to somebody's story and their journey could really provide inspiration to other people and encouragement along the way. So, Colleen, this has been an amazing podcast episode. And before I ask you for the positive message, I just have to ask you, you've achieved so much in your career. And what is next? What could possibly be next, Colleen?
So this is my goal. And again, it's a journey, it's not a destination. My goal is to be a motivational speaker. So let's see how the journey evolves. I'm starting this, and yeah, that's what I want. And the reason why I want to be a motivational speaker, going back to my why, because you need to have the why, just like I told you. It's not to be like, I get to be on a stage. It is, I actually want to share with people. And I think that I want to help people to realize they're not alone. I want to help people to realize that they need to slow down, especially in this world that we're moving so fast. I want people to realize that they need to focus on the journey, not on the destination. And I think I have the ability to do it. So hopefully, in a couple of years, maybe you will see me as a motivational speaker. Or if not, maybe the journey took me someplace else.
Colleen, you are on your way. You have a TEDx talk in your back pocket now. Like, that is amazing. That is truly, that has launched you in that direction. And just to hear you speak about the passion behind the motivational speaking to help people. I think especially today, Colleen, as you were speaking about helping people learn that it's about slowing down, about reflecting. I think that message is going to be so incredibly critical, even that much more, obviously on a variety of different generations, but I really do think that's going to be impactful for younger generations where they've grown up in this era, if you will, that's super fast paced, that does exude that sense of instant gratification that you have to be successful overnight, which of course we know doesn't happen. So those messages that you are going to be putting out into this world are definitely ones to be heard. And I love how you also mentioned, I just wanted to make this a point because I think it's really important. But when you drive home that you are not alone in certain situations, how people do need to hear that today. Because what was it? I think it was in 23. But there was an epidemic declared by the former US Surgeon General. And you think about the isolation and the loneliness. And when people maybe come home and they may be by themselves, but like stirring about their career, their progress in life. But to hear that, wow, like I'm not alone. And for people really to read your book was so incredibly powerful. I really, as you see, I took notes. I have all my notes here. So, Colleen, I would love to round out this amazing podcast episode with a positive either quote or a positive message for our community.
So I actually am going to use a quote I already used today. I hope that's okay. It's from Jim Rome. I actually think he's a legend, honestly. And the quote is, "Nothing changes until you do." And I firmly, firmly believe that. We all have the ability to change ourselves. Our circumstances do not define who we are. And so if you want something to happen, don't be a victim. You can make the changes. It might take some time, but it's really, really important to invest in yourself. And that's what that quote means.
That is so powerful because, it reminds me too of not getting to the end of your life and looking back in regret. But that, like you said, you can make that change now. You can take that step forward if it is a career path change, but to do it now because you're right. I do. I think it takes courage. It takes that courage to take that step forward, but such a powerful message to end this incredible podcast episode. Colleen, I do. I genuinely want to thank you for coming on to this podcast because you have a wealth of knowledge, that lived experience that we spoke about throughout this, just this discussion, but to be able to share that with people now. And yes, you are on your way to motivational speaking. So I'm thrilled for you. I had an amazing time in this conversation, and I cannot wait for listeners to really to take a listen to all of this.
Courtney, thank you. Thank you for opening your platform to me. This was so fun. And you even got to meet Buster, right?
Good. Well, you know what? When you said the name, I was thinking to myself, I didn't know if I heard it correctly. Our dog is named Buster too.
No
So
way.
I'm dead serious. He just turned 9. He just turned 9.
Wow.
Because I was like, hold on, did she say Buster? I didn't want to say it at the beginning, but I'm like, no, like, yes, we have another thing in common there. So that is Colleen. Thank you so much.